Hello, I'm Cory Johnson. My presentation is over the Auctoratus in the Roman arena, new insights from modern combat sports. So what is an Auctoratus? An Auctoratus is essentially a volunteer gladiator who would subject themselves to voluntarily enter a gladiator school and train as a gladiator and fight and possibly die as a gladiator. I was always under the impression that gladiators were prisoners of war, slaves, convicted criminals, and they were forced to fight in these death matches for the bloodlust and sadistic Romans that wanted to watch these kind of things. When I found out that there was a large percentage of volunteers who did this, I really wondered what would be the motivations for somebody to want to subject themselves to this kind of ridiculous, severe training lifestyle and the competition that could ultimately lead to your death and for sure bodily harm. So I wondered what would be the motivation for people to want to do this. There's obviously the physical consequences that would you would think would scare people away, but there was also very strict Roman social consequences for them doing this. Um, I thought that maybe with what I've been doing with the last 15 years of my life, that maybe I could bring some of my life experience in, and maybe offer uh, a new comparison or a new way of looking at these motivations. So I've been involved with mixed martial arts in one form or another for the last 15 years. I've fought and competed and coached, and I've done it all around the world. I've refereed and judged and hosted events. I run two schools here in Lubbock. So, I mean, it's what I do for a living. And so I thought that maybe I would be able to offer some insight from what modern combat sports we do today and how the training and the philosophy and the understanding this sport can transfer and translate to maybe some better some understanding of why people would want to subject themselves to this. I think boxing and MMA are probably our closest and our best tools to use for this comparison because one, there's an allure to the training and the lifestyle that comes with people who want to do this, and also there's recently been this influx of celebrities and other things that I think also give us a good idea of why rich and well-known political Roman elites would want to try to do volunteer as a gladiator. Um, right away, once these guys would be or women would become a gladiator, they would have to take a sacramentum or a gladiator oath. So a sacramentum is a religious oath. It's if I pledge to do this, and if I break the rules, I hope the gods drop a boulder on me. That kind of thing. That they curse themselves if they don't fulfill their oath. The gladiator oath, just a little snippet of it, is I will endure to be burned, to be chained, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. So we already can tell just from the quote that this is a really dangerous lifestyle, and if you're not familiar with this kind of stuff, it already is like, why would anybody want to do this? You're a contractual obligation to the gladiator school, the ludus. That's what that word means. It's a gladiator school. And there's also, you would be subject to this infamia, which is, like I mentioned before, this debasing, this embarrassing debasing of yourself and losing face of yourself and your ancestors in the eyes of the Roman people and stuff. So it was really, and it's also harshly criticized again by Roman literary sources that we have. Um, I think one thing that we have to really deconstruct to understand, if we're going to begin to understand why people might have done this and why they do it today, is violence is for the spectator and not the athlete. We have to move away from this sadistic thing that people would only want to do this to kill people and be violent, and also that people would only want to watch this to be violent. So violence is for the spectator, not the athlete. Violence is a skill acquired through training. Training brings familiarity, and familiarity removes emotions. Emotional athletes in these kind of situations, they adrenaline dump, they lose their stamina, they mental awareness, the slow decision making. If you've ever had that fight or flight feeling in your life, it's that, and it pops itself up when you're new in this sport, and it has to be learned to tamper down by familiarity with what you're doing of fighting and punching and kicking and wrestling in front of these people. Also, there was this word called Roman virtus, Latin. It means, it's where we get our word virtue or honor, and it was this Roman obsession with being great and trying to strive for Roman excellence. And I think that a lot of this runs very parallel with these motivations today. Run very parallel with this. I mean, no rank or status exists when you compete against each other, or in the cage, or in a ring, or a cage, or whatever, or on the sands. If you fight as a gladiator, nobody really cares who you are, what your parents are. It only really matters what you can do. Did you train hard enough to win? Did you not? the other thing is, all of our greatest fights in history are from this back and forth battle that show these kinds of desirable human traits, this determination, strength, virtue, glory, uh, bravery, right? And so like they don't hate each other to have to do this to each other. That's why no matter what is said 99% of the time after two guys fight, whether they were mad or played up to the crowd and all the press conferences to get more attention, they always hug and are congratulatory afterwards. And it's because they're proud of being able to conquer an equally dangerous foe, not just destroy him physically. Seneca, a Roman intellectual, knew this as well. A gladiator reckons it ignominious to be paired with his inferior in skill, and considers him to have conquered without glory who has conquered without peril. So they could see these elements of Virtus in these gladiatorial bouts, and it's not sadism or the violence or the gore that they're talking about. So the lure of the ludus in the gym. So if we can get away from this violence, and we understand that over 50% of the gladiators by the end of the Republican period were volunteers, then we know that they're drawing these volunteers from all levels of the Roman social order. So therefore the motivations for them to want to do it would be different, because for some people it's not going to be money. You know, these Roman elites sometimes had these big households and these clients that they had to constantly deal with, and everybody would, you know, work for them. So sometimes the lifestyle itself and training brings in guys who just want to be themselves in these environments. They're important people outside, or they're not. And like I said before, it doesn't really matter when they train for these kind of things, and you have this lifestyle of training and competing. The only thing that matters is I think it touches something very honest about the human experience of, you can do this or you can't. And if you can't do it, it's because you didn't work hard enough, and you can go back and work hard enough to do it. So there's something about that honesty that draws a lot of people in. There's always going to be money, right? Like money's always going to be a motivator for poor people people who are destitute, who want to change their life and they believe they can do it by this. And we also have to remember that the gatekeepers who wrote about the Auctoratus or the Auctorati or Auctorati were the 1% of the 1%. They're the highest of the echelon of the political life, and they're the ones whose writing comes down to it. So they don't really speak to how everyone in Roman society saw these volunteers. I mean, one instance is there's a political noble named Gracchus who fought in a gladiator show and was just ridiculed beyond belief, and how terrible and debasing it is, and how big of an embarrassment he made of himself. So we always have to keep in mind that what we're reading, our sources are very biased in some ways. All eyes on the sand. So again, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that also can help us understand these transfers, or these Roman elites that would want to try this for no understandable reason, we see it today. We've had CM Punk, Brock Lesnar, Dave Bautista, these famous wrestlers that don't really have a familiarity with the sport, come over and fight in these shows, and they get to fight in big cards on big stages in front of a lot of people because they bring this attention. Well, the same would have been true in Rome too. If I'm hosting a show, I'm an editor or a promoter who's putting on a gladiator show, these people, if I can get more attention, the better for me. The more money, the more fame I'm going to have, the more recognition I'm going to get, because that's what they would use these gladiator shows for. So, and then for the nobles that want to try to get some of this glory, it's a lot easier for them to hop over all the regular guys because they're bringing so much attention to the event itself. Right here, you see this Latin inscription here. It comes from Pompeii. It's actually a gladiator show advertisement. And I think it's funny how similar it is to this Mayweather and Logan Paul. The Paul brothers are YouTube stars who are now, one's getting to fight Floyd Mayweather, the other's supposed to fight an ex-MMA champ named Ben Askren. And they get to do this just because they bring so much attention. They have no history in the sport at all. So even their motivations are obviously money, but it's also not just money because they have money. So there's something deeper going on for why they want to do it. One of those other reasons I think is transcendence. Fighting brings a different type of fame. The famous fighters that we have in history they transcend class, race, history. Even a lot of them are like, Tyson, Ali, Hopkins, Bernard Hopkins, Floyd Mayweather. A lot of these guys have criminal histories or convicted felons, or some were not popular in their own time and were social outcasts and took very strong social positions like Ali. And they seem to shake all that off, and they end up always becoming heroes nonetheless because of what they're able to show. They're able to put something on the line in front of all to see, and they showcased this heart, determination, desire, glory, this weirdness that I think also was being shown then. It's their cultural and national icons. I mean, when you travel a lot, these guys are known for being American athletes and American fighters. I think it speaks to something deeper then and now, the ability to overcome bodily damage, and most of all, fear. That's something every human can understand, whether they like the sport or not. In search of Virtus and Dignitas. So Dignitas is just another word for dignity. Virtus, they're similar. They remember this Roman obsession with greatness and ethical worth. They would want to do this to be great, because now, especially in the imperial period, I would argue that all the traditional political and military routes to become famous and to achieve this ethical worth and greatness that they were so obsessed with were limited, because now you can only be the emperor's right-hand man. You can be his lapdog, or maybe you can go be a famous gladiator, because they were obsessed with this thing. So once the imperial period starts, there's no more Mark Antony's, Julius Caesar's, Pompey's, Sulla's, Marius's, Scipio's. There's no more of these great, famous, made men who on their merits became famous and were able to get all this Roman weirdness and stuff. So I think that would probably leave a pretty big avenue for some of these guys that want to try their hand at being a gladiator. It's obviously more powerful than just bloodlust and sadism. The triumph over fear has been with humans forever. We have stories and heroes about these kinds of things. And then, like I had said, regardless of what anyone thinks in their own time about how debasing it would be, or embarrassing or so wrong of you and your social class to try such a thing, when you win a bout in front of 50,000 people in the Coliseum and they're cheering your name, it's pretty hard to say that's not glory. And it's pretty hard to say that that's debasing or embarrassing. And obviously this feeling was prevalent because even Commodus, the Roman emperor, tried to be a gladiator. He apparently had 735 bouts. So if you want to talk about someone who has absolute any reason to try it, he was trying to do it. So obviously I don't think his 735 undefeated bouts was a real representation of what it's like to be a gladiator, but he tried it nonetheless. Conclusions: our role of gladiator is more than just a powerless dying for the powerful. Well, I think we've explained why there's a lot more desirable virtues being shown in this sport. Inspiring performances of martial virtue and mastery of arms. Again, not the sadistic bloodlust. All these attracted people from all across the social and political order. And I think that this is something we've been working on lately, and by using this comparison, it's kind of helping us not accept the criticism of the Auctoratus, by trying to understand the motivations, by framing them into this, by framing the phenomenon through these new modern analogies. And hopefully that'll allow us to understand the role of gladiators, Auctocrati, and spectacles all together. So this is just some of the stuff we've been doing. So I thank you guys for watching my presentation.